Hello, welcome back to Kim Reads as we continue with Louis Braille. So many ways to say no. Louis was home in Coupvray when he finished his alphabet. He could hardly wait to get back to school and show it to the other boys. What would they say? Would they like it? They just had to. Louis wasn't disappointed. The boys loved his alphabet from the first touch. It's so simple, so easy to feel, and so small, so much fits right on our fingertips. We can write letters to each other, and keep diaries. We can take notes in class, and read them back later. And books, Louis said quietly. Don't forget about the books. Soon we will have all sorts just for us to read. News of the alphabet spread quickly through the school. Soon the director of the institute sent for Louis. Tell me, Dr. Pignier said, what is this alphabet of dots I've been hearing so much about? Please, Louis answered eagerly. If you will read something aloud, I'll show you. So Dr. Pignier picked up a book and began to read, slowly. You can go faster, sir, said Louis. Soon Louis's hand was flying across the paper, punching words into dots. When the director stopped reading, Louis turned the paper over. He brushed his fingers lightly over the lines of raised dots. And quickly, easily, without a single mistake, he read back every word. Amazing, Dr. Pignier kept murmuring. Amazing. How old are you, my boy? 15. Louis answered. 15, to think that men have been searching for such an alphabet for hundreds of years. And one of my boys found it instead. 15. Amazing. Louis glowed with pride. Now was the time to ask the most important question of all. Sir, when can we start making books? Dr. Pignier was silent for a long time. What was wrong? Finally he spoke. You are young, Louis, he said. Louis frowned. What kind of answer was this? Louis tried to explain. The institute was a charity school, had no money of its own. Some of the money it needed came from government, some from rich friends. There was no money left over for books. Sir, Louis said, will you write to these men who have money? Will you tell them about how my alphabet works? Will you please tell them how cheaply it can be made into books? I will, said Dr. Pignier. But Louis, don't get your hopes up too high. Some things take time. A great deal of time. Dr. Pignier sat down and wrote letter after letter. He wrote to rich men. He wrote to important men. He wrote to men who had spent their whole lives working for the blind. One by one, their answers came back. Some were long, some were short, some were written with fancy words, but they all ended up saying the exact same thing. No. Some people just didn't like change of any sort. What's wrong with the old ways, they wrote. They worked well enough all these years. One man had already given money to help make some of the old race print books. Now you're telling me they're not good enough, he wrote angrily. Well, let me tell you something. They had better be. You will not get another cent from me. A few people were even jealous. One man who ran another school for the blind wrote, I will allow this to be tried out in my school. Over my dead body. He was afraid Louis' alphabet might be too good. He was working on one of his own. And many, many people didn't say no or yes. This sounds very interesting, one man wrote. I'll give it to you as soon as I can. But when would that be? Next week? Next month? Or never? People like this weren't against Louis's alphabet. They just didn't care. They were too busy with their own lives to bother with problems of the blind. So the years began to pass, and nothing much happened. The blind students kept on using Louis' alphabet. There was only 100 students. What about the millions and millions of blind people all over the world, still waiting for books? Louis couldn't get them out of his mind. He tried to stay cheerful, but it wasn't always easy. Sometimes his mind filled with bitter thoughts. His alphabet was good. He had proved that, but no one cared. Not enough. More than 3 years passed. When Louis was 19, he graduated from the institute, but he didn't leave school. Dr. Pignier had been watching Louis for years now. He had seen him grow from a boy to a man. Every year, Louis Braille won a prize in something. Grammar, history, geography, arithmetic, math, even working with his hands. Dr. Pignier knew that Louis was also a natural leader. He loved to joke and tell stories. Just as important, he knew how to listen quietly when other people had troubles to tell. Yes, Dr. Pignier decided Louis would be too good to lose. So now he asked him to stay on at the Institute as a teacher. A teacher? Louis accepted joyfully. For more than anything, he wanted to stay in Paris. Paris was where people were. People who could help him with his alphabet. If only they would. Besides, Louis had grown to love the school and his many friends there. It was like a second home to him now. Dr. Pignier warned Louis that the pay wouldn't be much, only 15 francs a month. But as a teacher, Louis would have the right to leave the school building any time he wanted without asking permission. And the first time in his life, he had a room of his own. It took Louis quite a while to get used to the silence. Louis liked teaching. He was good at it, too. For one thing, he always spent a lot of time getting his lessons ready for class. Every night, he sat at his desk and thought about what he wanted to do the next day. Then he punched his thoughts into dots. So he never shuddered or stumbled or forgot what he wanted to say. From the beginning, everyone looked up to Louis Braille as a teacher, and they trusted him as a friend. School teachers were not supposed to be kind and patient in Louis' day. Many of them were not. They shouted and yelled and made fun of slow boys. They thought learning was something that had to be pounded into children's heads. Louis knew this was wrong. He used a firm kindness instead, a friend later wrote. Louis never made fun of his students, no matter how slow or silly they were being. He was especially gentle with the youngest boys. Louis had been at the school for many years now, but he had never forgotten what it was like to be new and alone. Louis loved his life as a teacher, but as usual, he was working too hard. He taught many different classes. He spent a lot of time with his friends. He was never too busy to help a boy with his work or to listen to someone's troubles. Every day he practiced music for several hours. Ever since Louis had come to the Institute, he had played piano and then the organ. Now he was very, very good. In 1833, he was made an organist at Saint Nicolas des Champs, one of the biggest churches in Paris. People were beginning to say that Louis could be really famous one day if he could forget everything else and worked most of the time on his music. Louis loved music. It stirred such feelings inside of him. It would always be a very important part of his life, but something else was more important, the alphabet of dots. Louis was working on a way to make the patterns of the dots stand for musical notes, and for numbers too. He also spent a great deal of time making raised dot books for the school library. Friends who could see sometimes helped him by reading words out loud. It was slow, hard work, hour after hour, night after night. Louis sat up punching dots. He worked until his back ached and his fingers grew stiff and sore. Louis could not keep on working this hard forever. First came tiredness. Some days he could drag himself from bed. But at first he tried to fool himself. All I need is a good night's sleep, he told himself. Again and again, I'll feel better in the morning. But most often he felt worse. Some days he could not even climb a flight of stairs without stopping to rest. The boys in class had to lean forward in their chairs to hear him. His voice was so weak. One day his head was hot with fever. The next day his whole body would shake with chills. But worst of all was cough. It grew worse and worse. One morning, Louis coughed so hard he could not get out of bed. The doctor came and shook his head at the sounds he was hearing. For a long time, the doctor stood silent. He didn't want to say what he knew he had to say. Finally, he asked, "Do you know what is wrong with you?" "Yes," Louis whispered, for he had stopped trying to fool himself now. Louis Braille was no doctor, but he knew the signs. Besides, other people at the Institute had suffered from the same sickness because the air was so damp. He had tuberculosis, a disease of the lungs. Some people say fresh air helps, the doctor said, and plenty of rest. But Louis and the doctor knew that there was no real cure for tuberculosis. Not then. It came and went, but always came again. Louis lay for hours after the doctor left. He felt too sad to move. And what would happen to his alphabet? Finally, Louis made a decision. He had been a fighter all his life. He would not let this terrible disease beat him so easily now. He might not have a long life, but he would have a full one. And that's the end of that chapter. See you later.